Welcome to the show. Super excited to have you here. We are sisters at the same publisher, right? And
Yeah,
so that's how we were
publisher sister.
introduced through the fact that we are both on our author journey. And I'm really excited to talk to you because you are a breath of fresh air in the world of online business coaching. I think there's just a lot of weird, shady shit that goes on. And so you are here as an expert attorney who helps people navigate the legal aspects of their online businesses. And we're going to dive into all of that. But first, let's start off with an intro. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thanks. Well, thanks for that kind intro. And I can't wait for people to read my book because I keep thinking I'm not going to have a lot of friends after this book comes out. But at least Janice and I will be cool. So that's fine. It happens when you speak the truth. But yeah, so thank you for having me. I'm Sam Vander Wielen. I'm an attorney turned entrepreneur. I was a corporate attorney. In the corporate world, I was a litigator. So that means I was like in court arguing before judges all the time, always doing business, related cases, and really had gotten to myself to a place in my career and in my life where I'd really made myself the victim of my situation. So I was very unhappy as an attorney, but I also acted like there was nothing I could do about it. And so I stayed in that job very miserable for a long time until I had a very scary plane incident, actually. That was kind of the life-shaking moment that I needed, that I thought I have a lot more control over some things on the ground than I think I do. Maybe not that plane, but some other stuff. And I actually left and started my own online business. And when I left to start my business, I actually didn't start a legal business. I started like a health coaching. I wanted to teach people how to cook. I love to cook. And so I got into this world, which was great because I got to make all my mistakes and kind of do really poorly and do all my shitty first drafts in this first business. But in doing so, I realized, like you said, there's this whole online coaching world going on. And I realized how badly a lot of things were going. And I was like, oh boy, somebody with some legal experience, with some financial or professional experience really needs to step in here, because so many things that people were doing wrong, unbeknownst to them, or people didn't know where to start. And I was really able to tap into that desire I had to make legal very accessible, because I knew as an attorney how infuriated I was that it was so inaccessible to so many people. So having an online education business was like the best next step.
I have many attorney friends. Attorney is one of those career choices, especially as Latinos, that we're pushed towards because you're going to make a shit ton of money. But I can't think even off the top of my head about a single person that I know who is really enjoying their career as an attorney, especially working for someone else. I know folks who've started their own practices and they're enjoying the process more. But what was the initial draw to the industry for you?
Yeah, so I actually write about this a lot in the book, but I had a very traumatic upbringing. I had a very violent childhood. My mom was an addict and she was unfortunately very mentally ill. She had a very difficult upbringing, and I lived in a state of violence as a child. I had no idea what was going on at home, whether things were going to be safe. I had also no ability to ever be myself, explore what I wanted, to think about myself. My entire life was about taking care of her, trying to figure out what the hell was going to happen next, because I was terrified to come home every day. And I honestly, somewhere along the line, I probably saw one too many episodes of Law and Order. Somewhere along the line, I was like, if you become a lawyer, lawyers are legit. I can get away from this. I'm going to be secure. I'm not going to need her anymore. And I'm going to be super independent. So I just put my head down and decided to become a lawyer. But yeah, to your point, I never stopped to think about, why do I want to do this? Is this really, do I know anyone who's even remotely happy doing this? And I just charged forward with it. And unfortunately, it was literally my first day of work at the firm that I looked down and I was like, oh shit, what did I get myself into? And then was saddled with student loans, right? So it was a little bit of now what do I do?
Yeah, those 6 figures of student loans can be the reason why you feel stuck in your career path. And I know there's a lot of folks that listen to this show that feel like they were in autopilot too when they chose their career paths. I think one of the things that happens for people is the sunken costs. You start thinking about, shit, how long did I go to school for this? How much money have I spent? I just got to suck it up. And so tell me more about when that epiphany happened for you, that you just realized life is too short to be doing this shit for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Well, for one, I think I started to do what I would never recommend you do if you get paid a salary, which is start calculating your actual hourly wage. And I was like, oh no, this is terrible. And there are a lot of other places I could have worked to make more money, right? And yes, it's a prestigious job, but actually, I think also it's a common misconception now as things have changed in the market. And I'm sure this is only worse now, given AI development and other things, that for young attorneys, we were getting paid like shit. And so we were not getting paid well. And so there was a little bit of this, like I had bought into this story that being a lawyer was like important and high paying. And I was like this high powered person. And then you're like, but wait, I actually am not getting paid that much. And I can never take a vacation. That was, for me, that was like a light bulb moment as well, because I realized as an attorney, because we work off of billable hours, when you go away, you're just buying time. Like you have to come back and make that all up. And so there's really not any time off. And I was like, what? This is a sham. Like this industry was sold to me that like it was this incredible thing. And I'm like, it's really not. So when I got exposed to online business, I think that was the first time I really had this mindset shift of like, at first was thinking about it like, okay, I'll leave being a lawyer. I'll be fine with making less money and I'll just learn to live. Like I'll eat ramen. I'll do what I got to do because I'll just be happier. And then I did start to have this mindset shift that was like, what if I could actually create more? Like, what if I could do better than what I've done and have the freedom too? And that seemed really crazy to me. But I make more in a month now than I ever made as an attorney in an entire year.
Go figure, because I mean, I think most people in our lives, especially ones that don't have any experience with entrepreneurship, are like, why the hell would you do that? It's the scariest thing you can do. There's no security. There's like so much that can go wrong. And I feel like when you let those voices be the overarching theme of everything that you do, it discourages you from thinking bigger, from giving yourself the option to like even consider what's possible.
Yeah, like whatever's possible could be better. That was mind blowing to me. And yeah, just being in the driver's seat. I mean, being able to go and do that on your own. I don't know if you felt this too, but like I didn't set out in this business to be like, I'm going to make as much money as possible. I didn't have a whole lot of self-belief, honestly. After having like a very bad lawyer experience, having the childhood that I had, I was just kind of like, I'm going to give it a go. I still feel sometimes in disbelief, like, who, me? Like you guys you bought this from me? It's still a little weird.
Yes, I like to say that entrepreneurship is a huge exercise in personal development, because it will definitely force you to confront all of those limiting beliefs that can be the thing that either you learn how to overcome so that you can succeed in your business, or it's the thing that derails you because it just becomes such a loud voice in the room that you don't take any action.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm curious, how comfortable are you diving into this plane story? Because I'm like, this shit sounds intriguing.
If I'm with me, as long as anyone listening is not like, oh God.
I hate flying, so this is going to be really good for me.
It's therapeutic. Well, hey, I'm alive. So
Yes.
As far as I know, so it's fine. It all turned out fine. Oh, yeah. I actually write about it in the book, and I put a note in there that was like, if you're afraid to fly, don't worry. It's over fast, and not because I'm dead. It's like, it's just fine. It's just funny, but it was very terrifying. So actually, to my earlier point that like I'd gone on my first real vacation since becoming an attorney. I went to Amsterdam, and we traveled like all over the Baltic Sea. It was awesome. We went to like Sweden and Russia and all these amazing, incredible cities. And so on the way home back to Philadelphia, where I'm from, yeah, we just hit like the worst, like one of those turbulence things that you hear about on the news. We hit that, and we were smack dab in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. So I was just like, this is it. We're all going down. People were screaming. People were crying. Of course, they had just done coffee service. So like coffee went everywhere. I remember it spilled all over like the little like knickknacks that I had purchased in Sweden that were like sitting on my feet. And so I was like, that's what I was thinking about as I thinking about dying. I mean, I thought I was having a heart attack. That was really probably the first time. I mean, I'm sure it was a panic attack, but it was the first time I remember thinking I was legitimately having a heart attack. And it was this like very odd, calm moment in the midst of this storm that I thought, like, what the hell are you doing? Like, this is what a joke. You're acting like it was like listening to a movie of myself. I could hear it all at once of like how much I would complain about my life, my circumstances, not realizing how lucky and privileged I was to be there, right? To be doing that kind of work. And that if I didn't like it, I had a choice because I could make room for somebody else who wanted to be there. And there was opportunity. I had more control over that part than my life that I thought.
Where do you think that mindset comes from? Because I think a lot of folks can default into that victim mentality where it's just like, well, my life is a sum of my circumstances, of my choices, and there's nothing I can do to control it. I think we tend to forget like everything that's happened to you up until this point is a result of choices. So like changing it, why wouldn't changing it be part of the choices that you make now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I recognize that also comes with a lot of privilege of like some people's circumstances are such that you've been handed a lot of shit, right? And that is not your fault. And that's due to a lot of things that are way bigger than us or that I could solve with like a tidbit on a podcast. But in my situation, that situation, yeah, realizing that that mindset was the one that was holding you back, like that there was some action that you could take. I think you have to dig deep and ask if you want things to be different. If you want things to be different, are you continuing to take the same steps exactly the same way every day? Are you doing the same stuff? Like, I mean, this would be similar to like if you were trying to get fit, but you're like, I'm not going to make any changes in my life. Like, you probably got to do a different workout, up the ante a little bit, do something different. I kind of see it similarly to changing your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you get back from this harrowing trip and you're like, I got to make some changes. So walk us through what that actually looked like, because dismantling your life is never just a cut and dry process.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think the first thing is making a declaration that this is something you're going to do. I'm the kind of person that like when I've decided, I'm already like gone. The horse has left the barn. I'm out, right? So literally within 3 days of having landed that or, surviving that plane, I came home. I registered a business. I bought a domain name. I did all the things that I teach people and that we'll talk about today, that I just was like, boom, boom, boom. Let me just get started. I didn't really know what I was doing or where I was headed exactly, but I just knew I needed to take some action. So this was in like May. By August 16th, I left the firm completely. So I decided to like spend that summer getting my website set up, doing a little bit of research about what kind of product I wanted to sell. Online business was still pretty new. This was in 2016. So it was still like a little bit up in the air. And so I wasn't exactly sure how to do it or what to do, but it was such a good experience in just trying. Like, I'm such an advocate for experimenting, having a very curious and open mindset going into something, being like, I'm not exactly sure how to do this or if it's going to work or if it's going to be successful. Let's just try it and we'll adjust. And I learned so much that summer about everything you and I do.
So you started, you said, with like a health and wellness coaching, correct? So tell me kind of how that started and then how it evolved to now the offerings that you have as a legal expert.
Yeah. So when I was at the law firm, my first thought when I wanted to create a business was like, what's something that I love to do? Because I hated being a lawyer so much. So I was like, what sounds fun? What's my hobby? Which this was like mistake number one. But I was like, what do I love to do in my free time? And then I thought about what's like the thing that people know me for or come to me about. And that thing for me was food. Like, everybody was always making fun of me. I know you and I have this in common too, but like people are always making fun of me at the firm because I was in such a traditional, like stuffy, like old white dude firm where everybody was like, oh, you eat salad? Like, oh, that's so weird. Or they thought it was so weird that I like meal prepped, for example, or that I love to work out. They saw that as laziness in a really hilariously ironic way because they were like, you should just be working, right? Like, so me going to the gym was like so frivolous. And so I thought, okay, that's what people come to me for. That's what I love to do. So now I'm going to become a food blogger because I was obsessed with food blogs and I was like a OG food blog reader. And so I was like, I'm going to just do that. I bought a light kit. I like got my kitchen all set up. I was so excited. And then the moment came when I was supposed to make all of this happen. And I was like, I don't want to document my food. I just like love to cook. This has nothing to do with what I want to do. But I knew I needed to make some money and get some experience. So at first I reached out to like people I worked with. I was on the board of trustees for the bar association. And so I like reached out to other people I worked with, colleagues, to let them know about my new business and what I was doing. And they were all the first people who hired me. And they would have me come in and do like cooking classes or coaching for their employees. I would come in and give like wellness talks for their employees and all of this kind of stuff. So it gave me a little cash, it gave me a little capital to get started. I realized I hated it, but I also learned so much about blogging and getting on social media for the first time. I mean, when you're just like a normal lawyer, you're not on social media. Like, I didn't ever care about social media before. So I really got started. But when I was doing all of this stuff, it wasn't really growing. And I was getting hit like every day with questions about legal stuff, even though I was never talking about it and I was never telling anybody. I would say like, oh, when I was a lawyer, it was difficult to have healthy foods prepared for me because I was busy and running to court and blah, blah, blah. That's about as much as I would mention it. And then people would be like, hey, what's the deal with an LLC? Like, do I need that? Should I have to? And I'd be like, that's not what I do. Don't ask me that. I'm cooking. There's only so long you can kind of fight that off until it became very obvious to me that I was sitting on a business.
That's hilarious, and I love the fact that you were committed to like figuring out what the thing was going to be without obsessing about the end result. because I think so many people get caught up in their head about making an investment, buying a course, buying some equipment because they want the guaranteed success and they think that the first thing's going to be the thing. And I promise you, like for most entrepreneurs, the first thing is never the thing that you actually end up being successful at. It's not even the thing you like doing. And giving yourself permission to just experiment, because this is all a huge experiment, is the initial part of this, right? You're not going to know what you like until you do shit.
Absolutely. I really had put a lot of pressure on myself that like first pivot, like out of becoming a lawyer and starting something new, was the only pivot I was allowed. And so I had put a lot of pressure on myself because I built up a lot of stories about what people were going to think of me, family and friends. I had a lot of people express their concern, their disappointment, their judgment, both to my face and behind closed doors. And I was so freaked out, like, if I don't get this right, then imagine what everyone's going to say.
They're going to be like, we told you so.
You're right. I mean, it's not only are you allowed to keep pivoting, completely changing careers or businesses, but even within your own business, it iterates so much. I mean, I've been in this business now, the legal business, for almost 8 years. Things have changed drastically. Just yesterday, I was like putting out AI fires left and right because people are contacting me, asking me all these questions about things that are very scary things that are happening with AI. And it's like, yeah, I mean, this stuff is changing. Like this idea that you're ever going to create something or go into something and it's going to remain the same. And I would invite all of you listening to think of how awesome that is, because it's actually what makes me love my job the most. I am always learning. People reach out to me with questions all the time that I don't know the answers to. And I love that because I'm like, now I have this opportunity to go learn. And now I know what other people are worried about that I'm not familiar with. So I think that's great.
Yeah. All right. So you take your first stab at entrepreneurship. You realize this is not the thing. You start pivoting back into what feels probably like, damn, I was trying to get away from this shit. And now this is going to be the thing that I'm going to start. So how do you give yourself permission to entertain that idea, right? Because there's a lot of people that hate their fucking jobs. And the last thing they want to do is start a business that's related to the current skill set that they have. They want to do something completely different.
Absolutely. I saw it and I continue to see it as the biggest middle finger to the legal industry. And it just makes me so happy because I was like, all of a sudden, I actually went to an acupuncture appointment, which it was so funny because I had it was right before I had brain surgery. I had brain surgery right when I started my legal business, like 4 weeks after. And so I was having neck pain that I would later find out was why I needed brain surgery. But I was going to this acupuncturist and I was lying on this table when they, put all the needles in you and you're just laying there. And I was thinking about how, like, if all these people I was meeting in the online industry, you when you started your business, a money coach, a health coach, anybody, I was thinking, what if they would have come to me at my old firm, right? They were charging me out at $350, $450, $550 an hour, right? The older attorneys would get a hold of that file. They would build the shit out of it. It would become so expensive, so bloated. And I also started to think about how they would never sit them down and explain anything to them. So they charge you thousands of dollars for a document, but no one's ever telling you, like, what is an LLC? Like, what is an S Corp? When's it time to upgrade? And what do I need to know about quarterly taxes? They're not teachers. They're not like sitting there and talking to you about it. And I was realizing no one would have been able to afford this. Not only that, it really pissed me off knowing that the people I used to work with would have made fun of all of us, right? They would have thought we were all a joke. Any woman that came in, they thought she was doing this cute little side thing because her husband probably made a lot of money. Like, it was like all of a sudden I heard all of those, like, I remembered all of these little comments, all these little microaggressions, and just thinking about the people I used to work for at the firms. Like, they were all rich, older people, right? And so I'm like, what are the options for people like us? And what are the options too for people who want to do stuff online where the old fuddy-duddies don't understand? They're like, what's Twitter? What's a podcast? Like, I don't get it, right? And so it's just not their world. It's not their world. And that's when it just was like, boom, light bulb moment. This is like an incredible way. So no, it's not me going back to being a lawyer. It's me like making up for what I hated about it, what I deeply, deeply hated about it. The inaccessibility, the stuffiness, the snobbiness, all of it. I was like, let's do this. I was so excited.
There is not really a more powerful fuel for entrepreneurship than rage.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us start our businesses because we're pissed about something we've confronted in the world. And for me, it's the Latino wage gap and the fact that, like, we work so damn hard as a community. What do we have to show for it from a wealth perspective? And so I'm just like, this is bullshit. We need to do something about this. I'm going to be the one. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to figure out how to be the one.
You just know what the fuel is to get started.
Yeah, exactly. And just having that personal relationship with what that struggle looks like, I think makes it real, because you can absolutely put yourself in your then target audience's position, and you know how to speak to them. You know how to market your skills because you know exactly what it is that they're going through because you've gone through it as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if people want to start a business, you want to sell something, you have to think of a problem. And you can think of the problem in two ways. You can think of a problem that exists with a current product. Like I remember I read an article one time about like button up shirts that for women, right, that are not built out for women's bust sizes because women have one size waist and maybe a different size bust. We're all cut differently, but shirts were always made like small, medium, large. And that doesn't work for women, right? So that's an example of like create a product that solves a problem because nobody's done that. You can also, though, go into an industry that has a major problem. There's a lack of access or there's some thing that they're not speaking to. I don't know. But like you can also view maybe your industry or something that you're going into like Janice and I have. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about all the mistakes that online coaches are making. I can think of 25,000 off the top of my head, right?
We have a 3-hour podcast coming from
Yes. What would you say are maybe like the top 2 or 3 that you're just like, y'all, we cannot operate our businesses like this. This is insane.
Okay, well, this is a very silly example, but I think, and you'll appreciate this, I think, but it shows like a fundamental issue within the industry. People's revenue is not their income. So when people call themselves millionaires, this pisses me off to like a different level. I become very fast on this because I'm just like, how are you charging people money to teach them how to build a business and you don't understand the difference between revenue and income? So you have to be very careful. I would encourage everyone listening to like put on a little bit of a detective hat and like look at everything you're hearing and reading online with a little bit of a skepticism. I'm not saying you should distrust everyone, but go into it with, I don't know, doing a little bit of your own due diligence, I suppose, because there is a lot of like fluff and nonsense when you're just like, that just doesn't make any sense. Like you'll see in the online industry, people will do really well 1 month and then they'll act like that was their revenue for the whole year. So there's a lot of dishonesty and fluffing, a lot of marketing themselves, like aspirational marketing to make you want to be like them. And I write about a lot in the book about how you have to be very careful if someone is selling something and the only thing that they have to, like the reason that they have to tell you to buy it is that they're very successful. That has nothing to do with anything. I want to know if their product is good. I want to know if they're knowledgeable. How have other people's experiences been with them? And so you have to be an advocate for yourself in that sense and kind of review things. And I've followed up when people put testimonials, I've reached out to those people and been like, can you tell me how your experience was? And often it is very different than what you see, what they say, or they'll say, well, that wasn't the whole story, or this was something I gave years ago, but afterwards I had a bad experience. And so it is very helpful to be your own advocates. That's a major problem.
Before we go to the next one, can you tell us why, as a coach, that can be a liability?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a couple of things. Like there's a legal principle about like warranties, guarantees language. And a lot of times I see, and this is kind of the language I was talking about earlier that made my ears perk up and want to go into this industry, because I would hear people say things like this and I would be like, whoa, 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 you're making it sound like everyone who purchases your course makes $10,000 a month, or, everybody who does this pays off all their debt. Like we have to be very clear that it takes work on that person's part, that everyone's circumstances are different. Like if it's health stuff, everybody's bodies are different, their health are different. Like it's just very subjective. And so not being misleading, I mean, that's illegal. There are misleading laws in the book in pretty much every state. So we want to be careful. There's also, on the smaller end, like misinformation, disinformation issues with the individual platforms when people are peddling stuff out as well. And I would also say that there's a scope of practice issue. So I see people who don't have like the professional experience talking about, it's not that you can't talk about topics and you can teach on topics, but giving personalized or individualized advice on things that are very subjective is not okay. That is illegal.
Okay, so give us another one where you're seeing a very common. I'm wondering if there's like business structure issues that you see people doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess, kind of related to the first is that like sometimes you will see coaches online telling people to like buy my course that's about, Pinterest or whatever. But then they're saying, and don't worry about like, you don't need all the legal stuff. You don't need contracts. You don't need an LLC because you should make like a lot of money first and then you can go back and do that. And that advice is very dangerous because, for one, legal stuff is not retroactive. So when you get legal things in place, like whether you get contracts or an LLC or even business insurance, that only works from now moving forward. So it protects everything you do from the day you get it in place moving forward, but it's not going to go back and fix anything you might have done wrong in the past. So it is dangerous advice, not only, and also kind of misleading advice when people tell you like, oh, buy my thing instead, that's about something else, so that you can get this like foundational important stuff done later. A lot of the myths that float around online about like, there's one that I hear all the time about how you don't have to register an LLC until you make $10,000. That there's no requirement. You can make $0 and get an LLC. There's nothing that says that you don't have to get something until you make 10,000. There's also nothing that says that you don't have to file taxes until you make a certain amount of money. Cause I hear that one a lot too. Like, I heard it's not even a business until it makes $10,000. No. If you make $1, if you lose $1, it's still a business. And actually, it's that advice is not only bad because it could, you could be doing something illegal. The other thing that annoys me about this advice, though, is that people are actually missing out on a big benefit of counting a business. For example, like if you're starting up and you've bought a computer, or you started to pay for some software, or you had to invest in some inventory and product to get your business off the ground, I really hope you're not listening to any advice to not register your business until it's X number of revenue, because you're missing out on counting this as business expenses for your taxes. And if you have other income, so if you're working another job, you can now reduce your taxable income, and you can even carry forward your losses if you don't have another business. There's actually a lot of benefits to this too.
So what do you say to folks who are like, well, Sam, I know like I should be doing this, but I literally don't even have the money for thinking about this. I just want to start my business. I don't think I'm running a super risky thing. And I just kind of want to see if there's some fruit here before I start like going down the rabbit hole of making a bunch of investments.
Yeah, that makes sense. I dedicated a whole chapter in the book to budgeting for a business and like how to time this with the kind of like the startup steps and the investigation phases of like, do I have a business? Do I have a viable product? Like the minimum viable product. I have a whole section about this. I think you can just look into whether or not your idea is viable first. I believe in that. I think it's once we try to start selling things. I think there's a difference between doing some market research, seeing what else is out there, do competitor research, talk to people, have some like informational interviews and things like this, kind of start checking stuff out online on social media. But once you want to start putting yourself out there and selling things, that's when I recommend budgeting for these things. Now, there are a number of options though that are either free, low cost, or it's not free, but somebody can pay for it for you. So I would encourage you to, like, for example, contact your local bar association. Most local bar associations have some pro bono work, some small business work for women, for minorities. Like there are lots of different groups out there that we can contact. So there are certain ways to get things, I guess, set up at least on a more budget friendly way. And a lot of things you can also do yourself. A lot of the reason why people believe that things are really expensive is because they're building, lawyers have done a really good job building themselves into the system, and they're not necessary. So there are a lot of things you can do yourself. Like I teach people, for example, how to get an EIN number from the IRS. It's free. It takes like 5 minutes, if that. So you can do that. You could register as a sole proprietor just to get started. Some states either don't charge for it or it's a very low charge. And then you can quote unquote upgrade to become an LLC when the time is right for you. So like there are ways to get started. You can't get away from the fee like that the state charges, for example, to register your business. But there are opportunities available though for grants and for small business startup stuff in your state, maybe even your county. So I would highly recommend trying that.
Yeah, absolutely. You do not need an attorney to file like LLC paperwork for you. You can literally go on your state's small business website, download the form, send it in fax or email or whatever. I've never paid an attorney to do that stuff for me. And it's like, you're just paying the annual registration fee, making sure that you're filing your annual report, doing everything that you need to do. I think when it becomes overwhelming for people because they think they have to do it, that's when they don't do it. And then it's like, that's not a reason not to do it, y'all. This is why there are creators like Sam who are breaking down these topics in a way that are digestible, because the legal system can be very tricky to navigate, the same way that the personal finance world is very tricky.
Absolutely. There are a lot. I get a lot of questions about like, am I allowed to do X? And it is interesting for me to hear, like, I get asked all the time, am I allowed to send a cease and desist letter, or does it have to come from an attorney? I'm like, whoa, no, of course not. Like, you can send your own. I'm not saying it has as much weight when you don't have Esquire after your name. It kind of helps. But in general, I was like, no, but it is interesting to see how much attorneys have made themselves kind of baked in and made people feel like they're necessary all the time. Attorneys are very helpful, by the way. They can do lots of helpful things. But I know from just being on the ground now for 8 years, like there are a lot of people trying to start who just, it's not an option between hiring an $800 an hour attorney and like doing it themselves. It's that or nothing. And so that's the point.
Yes. Okay, so as online coaches, we are creating a lot of intellectual property. And as we know, it's very easy to have someone steal your shit. And I think, especially now in the world of AI, it's like, oh my God, are we building these empires that are basically a house of cards? How do we protect ourselves and the intellectual property that we are creating?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So, I mean, it first starts with actually taking the formal steps to protect your content first and foremost. And I don't just mean content that you're putting on like social media or on your website, but the content of your actual programs. If you haven't done any of this registration yet, I recommend starting with that. Like if you have not protected the actual content of any online course you sell or something like that, that is the place to start. So I would start with registering those with like the Copyright Office, for example. Copyrights are much more affordable to register than trademarks. And that's another thing where it's like, I have a training for this in my program to teach my students just how to do this themselves. I actually file one in real time on a screen share video because it is so easy. You literally like upload a file, fill out a form, pay a small fee, much, much smaller fee, and you just submit that. And you can submit them in groupings. Like my ultimate bundle, for example, is like a pack of legal templates and videos. So I like uploaded all the legal templates, then did all the videos separately and got copyright protection for all of those. So now if someone steals that or AI scrapes that from the internet or something, I have really good federal protection because copyright registration in America it offers you a very hefty fine if someone violates this. So that's the big benefit. So that's really where I would start. I mean, we can trademark names and things like that, but honestly, at the end of the day, I'm really much more concerned about the actual content. Like people can steal my name.
The stuff you're selling.
Yeah, it's like, I don't think it's like the name of my thing that necessarily, I think yours is a little bit different because you came up with such a good name for your podcast and everything. But it's like, if you have my program's called the Ultimate Bundle. I have a trademark on it because it's now, we have 4,000 people in it. It's a thing. And so I wanted to protect it, but I was more concerned about protecting its content.
How do we protect our online identities as online entrepreneurs? Because that's another thing too.
I know. Did you hear? I don't know if you heard about this recently. There are these two voice actors that are suing an AI company because they were hired off of Upwork and they were told that they were just doing these little like voice clips that were for internal purposes only, never going to be used externally. And the guy and his wife were actually driving in a car and he heard his voice on a commercial. I'm still like trying to process this. I can't believe it. So they took his voice and they're selling it because he has that like great, booming radio voice. And so they're now selling it to all these people. And, you can sue, but like, I just also know that that's not practical for people. So this actually is the first time that I've been sweating it a little. I feel like I've gone through a lot of hills and valleys in the online business industry. And now I'm like, the law has not caught up with this, right? I saw that there is a call for lawmakers in Congress to add something to the books that says that it's illegal to steal people's voices, their likeness, images of them. I'm hoping for that. Meta actually, just as of today, as we're recording this, is the deadline to submit an application saying you are not okay with them. You don't have their permission. They don't have your permission to use all of the content that you've ever posted on the platform to build and train their AI machine. So if you don't opt out by today, you're lost. And they're not honoring this for all Americans. It's an option, they're saying. And I'll give you the link after this interview. Yeah. But they're only honoring people who are requesting it in the EU because there's a law in the EU called the General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR, which we are all subject to, even here in America. But they're honoring it for them. But for us, they're saying like, thanks for submitting it. We'll think about it. I mean, I feel a little like I've got my hands in the air. Like, I don't know what to do. Yeah.
That's terrifying. And I think about just like protecting your stuff in the United States. Obviously, the internet is a global place. So what happens if like some content creator in another random country decides to just copy all your shit? Do you have any legal recourse?
Yeah, you have some. So for one, if you trademark or copyright things, we have a reciprocal agreement with several, dozens and dozens of other countries around the world where they will honor our trademark rights, right? But the problem in all of these cases is always like, okay, but who's going to enforce it, right? So it's on me. So what, I'm going to hire an attorney in like Bolivia and then try to sue someone there? Like, good luck. I don't know how to do that, right? Like, or I don't want to do that. It just sounds very hard. So it is a little bit like, yeah, we have rights, but it's hard. People ask me this a lot about working with clients internationally or selling to people who don't live in the US, even people who don't live in your own state. And it's difficult because yes, you have rights because they've like entered into a contract with you here in America, but how are you going to enforce it? That's really the problem. And I just really think that the law has not caught up with a lot of what we're doing, unfortunately.
Let's talk a little bit about terms and disclaimers, right? Because we were talking earlier about all these wild claims that people can use as marketing tactics. What should online coaches be aware of when it comes to terms and conditions and disclaimers when they're, advertising their programs?
Yeah, so you should always have a disclaimer on your website, especially, but then there's also disclaimer language that like I always build in, for example, in my contract templates, because the point of a disclaimer is telling people who you are, what you do, and what you don't do, with the purposes of saying like you've got to make the decision that's best for you because I'm being really honest about who I am and what I do. I think the key, and this is a place where the online business industry has misled people a little bit, is that you have to then be consistent with that. So like I have a lot of people who will say, like health coaches, for example, who are like ordering and interpreting lab results, which is illegal. And then they say to me, no, but I have disclaimer language that says that they understand I'm not a doctor. And it's like, no, it's not like I couldn't tell you like, I'm not a doctor, but now I'm going to perform this surgery on you. Like that's not how it works, right? It's like, I'm not qualified. It's illegal, right? And so like, I can't do that. That's the point. The point of having the disclaimer language is so that you cover your own ass to say, I told you I wasn't a doctor, but also to really, really cover your ass, you then have to not do things that like only a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, it depends who we're talking about, can do. So that's kind of how I feel about disclaimers. So like I said, we put those on our website. Then we also put kind of smaller language into all of our contracts so that when we're selling to people, whether you're selling digital products, physical products, or services, you have that language. And then terms and conditions are similar. Like terms and conditions is a policy that you can put on your website that covers, return policies, intellectual property use, consent, like all of these kinds of things. You can also use something what's called terms of use, which is more like a contract at checkout if you sell things like courses, memberships, or digital products. And that's because the idea when you sell those things is that, and the goal for us is that we sell these all the time when we're sleeping, on vacation. So we're not individually speaking to these people before they purchase. So that's your opportunity to have a contract and a contractual relationship with them. So that's something, the terms of use is what we put at checkout. So when people buy from us, we're covered. So we talk about things like payment terms. In America, for example, if you sell something that has like a monthly fee, like you can do 5 monthly payments of $200 or something like this, you're allowed to continue to like auto recharge people's credit cards. You just have to have language in your contract that says that you're going to do that and that you're not going to reach out to them to ask for consent every single time. And that by them purchasing, they're consenting to you doing this. So that's an example. Same thing with chargeback language. This is really popular in our industry. People will purchase things from people online and then complain to their credit card and say like, I never got this product, or I don't like this product, when they really did. So you need that chargeback language, for example, to protect yourself when you go up against PayPal or Stripe or some credit card company to make sure you can keep the money that you've earned.
Okay. If you were starting your business from day one right now, what's the biggest mistake you would avoid that you made in your journey?
I didn't necessarily make this. I adjusted it along the way, but I think the biggest mistake I would encourage people to avoid is putting all of your energy into social media. I think social is very fluid. It's what I call toilet content. So it's a lot of stuff we put out and it's just like, boom, right out to the ocean. I would really encourage you to focus on creating some long form content in a place that's more evergreen, what I call the big three. And I write about in the book as the big three of like YouTube, podcasts, or an SEO optimized blog post. Honestly, all the things you do should be optimized. I'm somebody who very heavily leans on SEO for every medium of everything I put out. So I'd really focus on longer form content that has the ability to continue to bring in leads to your business, because I really want you to think about it like as if you were depositing 10 cents every day into a high interest savings account and you're like, this is doing nothing, this is doing nothing. And then one day you're like, oh shit, I actually have some money here. And it was growing while I was not doing anything, right? And so that's what I would encourage you to do, because it's very tempting to get sucked into thinking that social is like really your key to blowing up. And it's much rarer than people think.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so fickle. The algorithm's always changing. And now we have to worry about them just like replicating us as creators and opting out of giving us any kind of credit, with AI. So it's just like, y'all, if you don't own your platforms, now's the time. Now's the time.
I'm a big email list advocate, so I guess I would just add that, like, whatever you decide to build, if you decide to go all in on a podcast or a YouTube channel, just the main goal really should be funneling to an email list. And I'm very, very grateful for having built such a robust email list. And we have over 33,000 people on my email list now. And I always joke with my team that I'm like, if I can get over 33,000 people to stay on a legal weekly email, whatever you write about, people are going to be way more excited. So, like, come on, I've somehow figured this out. Yeah.
I love that. All right. So you're writing a new book. You are a debut author. Tell us what we can expect, title, all the things.
Yeah. So my book, When I Start My Business, I'll Be Happy, a practical, no BS guide to successful online entrepreneurship, comes out April 15th, 2024 or 2025. Sorry. And, I am so excited. Yeah, I'm so excited for this to come out. So in this book, I mean, my real goal was to weave in a personal narrative of a lot of what you and I have talked about, of like thinking that changing jobs was going to solve all of my life's problems. But what I didn't know was that after starting my business, my dad would get leukemia. I would become his caregiver. I had brain surgery, and then my mom was just killed last May. So I have gone through a lot of shit since I've started my business. And spoiler alert, it didn't fix my life, but it gave me a lot of other things. And along the way, because of all of that, I had to learn how to build a legitimate long-term business that was not built on social media, that was not built on growth tactics, that was focusing on my customers' happiness and my product being really, really good so that they would go out like little foot soldiers and bring in lots of other people. And yeah, I've built up this big business with this strategy that I feel very passionately that other people can do too. So the book is going to teach you how to do this, really focusing on those big three I mentioned, the email list, and marketing yourself in a healthier way for all of us.
I love that, because I think that's one of the areas of entrepreneurship, like, that just gets people worked up. How do I show up? Where do I show up? Where's my biggest ROI? Like, what are we doing here? And so I love that you're focusing in on how you've built your business for sustainability, because at the end of the day, that's why we're all doing this stuff. We're not out here just most of us are not out here just trying to make a quick buck and ride a trend. We are out here trying to create legacy businesses that are going to give us the lifestyle and the financial freedom that we want. So for folks who are piqued by our conversation, who are really curious about how you can support them in their journey to, get their business in a place where they are legally compliant and also just not killing themselves to earn every single dollar, where can folks find out more about you, Sam?
Yeah, so I'll give you a couple free resources to get started, because I am a big advocate for giving people lots and lots of valuable content. So I have a podcast as well called On Your Terms, which Janice has been kind enough to grace me with her presence on. So you can come listen to On Your Terms, or if you listen to podcasts, I have tons of episodes for you about how to form a business insurance, like all of the things. So you can go listen there. You can visit my website, samvanderwielen.com. I've got like over 1,500 blog posts about a lot of similar topics. And you can visit my site, samvanderwielen.com, to grab legal templates like downloadable contracts you need, as well as my ultimate bundle program. So I'll make sure that you have all the links to that below. And I'll share a link down below too, if you want to be one of the first people to know when my book, When I Start My Business, I'll Be Happy, comes out next year. We're just collecting a little like excited, notified VIP list. So I'll share that link down below.
Amazing. I am so inspired by the work that you do. It's always just women show up for the things that need to be showed up for. Like, I just can't imagine any man is just like sitting there like, I really want to help online business coaches run their businesses more effectively and not get into legal shit. Of course, it's going to be women who save the world. And so you're a prime example of one of those. Super honored to call you a colleague in this space. And I am really excited for folks to get inspired by our conversation. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.